Both the helicopter and the plane crashed in the river.
At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors.
And it's horrific and extremely rare and unprecedented.
What happened yesterday shouldn't have happened.
The goal is to get safety improvements. The safest airplane in the world is the one that doesn't fly.
Tonight marks 6 weeks since the tragedy involving Flight 5342. January 29th, 67 lives were lost when the plane departing from Wichita collided midair with an Army Black Hawk helicopter just seconds before it was scheduled to land at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. This week, the NTSB releasing their preliminary report into their investigation. In that report, they call for action from the FAA to limit helicopter traffic around that airport. Over the next 30 minutes, our investigative team digs into those findings, what recommendations are being made, and what's next to make sure a tragedy like this never happens again. We start with reporter Sean Logging breaking down what the NTSB calls serious safety concerns at Reagan Airport.
A critical safety issue must be addressed without delay.
The NTSB laying out that there is still a lot its investigation has to learn about the mid-air collision of Flight 5342 from Wichita and an Army Black Hawk helicopter on January 29th.
The quickest part of the investigation is determining what happened. The part that takes longer is the how and why.
But making clear Tuesday, action is needed, detailing data it's collected of close proximity events at and near Reagan National Airport between planes and helicopters.
Half of the encounters we reviewed, again from 2011 through 2024, the helicopter may have been above the route altitude restriction.
Jennifer Hamady with the NTSB says at least once a month between 2011 and 2024, there was a traffic collision avoidance system alert requiring immediate action. And at Reagan National between October 2021 and December 2024,
there were 15,214 occurrences or close proximity events between commercial airplanes and helicopters,
with a risk of future collisions.
An intolerable risk to aviation safety.
The NTSB urgently recommends an end to a helicopter route east of Reagan National.
It shouldn't take a tragedy like this to occur. Unfortunately, one did, and so we are calling on action, but there clearly were indicators.
The preliminary report providing information on crew experience, history of the flights, and information from the recorders. The NTSB says those black boxes are where they still have a lot of work because of limits from the recorders on the Black Hawk.
Our team has a lot of work to do.
And those findings highlight the congested airspace around Reagan National has been a problem for years. It's why the NTSB is making two rare but urgent recommendations to the FAA to limit helicopters flying in that area. The first recommendation is to ban helicopters flying on Route 4, while two runways, 15 and 33, are being used for planes landing and taking off. So take a look at this map here. The NTSB wants to eliminate that highlighted helicopter flight path from Haynes Point, directly across the river from the airport, down to Wilson Bridge, while planes are departing and arriving. This is the same route the Army Black Hawk helicopter was on when it collided with Flight 5342 just seconds before landing. The second recommendation would be to find an alternative helicopter route when that segment of Route 4 is closed. The NTSB says they do not have an alternative route picked out, as that would be up to the FAA. But an aviation expert tells us this collision could have been avoided if these changes were made sooner.
We can't sit back and wait for a later report. We got to call it right now. We got to say there's action needed and hope that the FAA is listening and responds accordingly. But they're sounding the alarm right now, saying enough's enough.
The Department of Transportation did temporarily restrict helicopter traffic in that area immediately following the January 29th crash. On Tuesday, the DOT announced that they would continue with those restrictions while the NTSB waits to see if the FAA will make those permanent to avoid close encounters between aircraft and helicopters. Now, DOT Secretary Sean Duffy said having helicopters fly down the same path as landing aircraft is like threading a needle, and he questions why the FAA didn't make changes years earlier after thousands of reported close encounters.
How did the FAA not know? How did they not study the data to say, hey, this is a hot spot, we're having near misses, and if we don't change our way, we're going to lose lives? That wasn't done. Maybe there was a focus on something other than safety.
And now the NTSB is looking into busy airspaces not only around Reagan National, but other airports across the country. So here are the next steps in that investigation. The NTSB says it will include flight simulations, interviews, and evaluating data that was captured by the aircraft's electronics. But a final report is not expected for at least a year. When we return, our investigative team sits down with the NTSB to break down one of the key pieces of this investigation, the flight recorder.